The likely prospect that the Prime Minister didn't mention it directly with President Xi, and I suspect that's partly because
he's a coward.
The Prime Minister has come under fire after Australian Navy divers were hurt during a dangerous move by a Chinese warship. It used sonar pulses, leaving HMAS Toowoomba's divers with minor injuries in international waters off Japan. But Anthony Albanese won't reveal whether he confronted the Chinese president about the incident.
As Prime Minister, I will always accept responsibility.
We've had the Education Minister, Tanya Plibersek, this morning say we won't discuss what our leader talks about with foreign leaders. Scott Morrison got in trouble about that once before. Is that fair?
So, look, I think in this instance, what we're dealing with is
to spotlight into the failure that is Anthony Albanese as a politician. This guy's never held a serious economic portfolio. He's never held a national security portfolio.
So, look, I think in this instance, what we're dealing with is the likely prospect that the Prime Minister didn't mention it directly with President Xi, and I suspect that's partly because
he's a coward.
That's my style. I hope you've noticed that.
And I suspect that's partly because it was a very sensitive matter, and there's some prospect that he may well have actually been looking for additional information, some corroboration or confirmation or clarification before, there was a formal position taken by the government about how to respond. I mean, it was a pretty big deal. And let's not forget the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister, Richard Marles, subsequently came out making the point.
Well, it's something of
So the message would have got through to President Xi, there's no question, despite the fact that China's behind a great firewall and they don't actually have Facebook or things that we usually use on our standard media. They do actually monitor from an intelligence point of view. And the message, no doubt, would have got through to the authorities in Beijing that Australia was, displeased and was obviously very concerned about what happened.
So this whole business of it not being released to the media, so therefore the public, until an hour after our Prime Minister had spoken. Is that strange? Did they try and hide it? Because now there are allegations that the Prime Minister didn't defend our ADF personnel on the foreign stage.
So, we've got a significant conundrum here because we're trying to make trade work better. We're trying to maintain or improve relations with China. At the same time, we're bolstering our ties with the United States and beefing up our defence force and our engagement on the security front with neighbours like Japan, Korea and Southeast Asian neighbours and beyond. It's a delicate balancing act to get the wording and the timing right. Now, you can critique it. My sense is that, on balance, it was not unreasonable for the Prime Minister to, exercise a degree of caution about how to handle this, and leave it for the Defence Minister / Deputy Prime Minister to make the announcement. Okay. Mindful that there's an agenda for what the Prime Minister is trying to engage President Xi on, that is about Australia's interests writ large. It's a delicate balance.
OK, just before we let you go, why would China do this?
Very interesting. There's a couple of potential reasons. One is that Australia is upsetting them over the Tuvalu Pact we've just signed with them. There's some remote prospect that this was a rogue ship captain operating without official blessing, but we know there's a pattern of behaviour now where we've had our aircraft laser designated, we've had all sorts of demonstrations of a fairly adversarial approach by China towards Australian aircraft and ships, but also you think about what's happened to the Philippines in the South China Sea, very aggressive use of cannons and blocking and barging and, medieval tactics of literally ramming ships as a way of operating below the so-called military kinetic threshold in a way that prevents the United States alliance being triggered but allowing China to get more from what it wants, intimidating its neighbours, intimidating Australia. Very important point here too, Nat. Australia's actions have a demonstration effect around the region. We need to be very careful about maintaining the approach. We've engaged in Northeast Asian waters for nearly 80 years now. And then thinking very carefully about not backing down, but responding carefully.
Interesting possibilities. I wouldn't have thought there would have been too many rogue Chinese ship captains, but few interesting points.
Nat, stop it.
You are ugly. I hate you. You are a liar.